Oh, hi everyone. I'm Jason Kale, and I am a community advocate for the SAP community. And my kids ask me, what do you do? And I tell them I make stone soup. And I don't know if you've heard of the story, but it's an old story. There are three monks who travel around the world looking to share knowledge and to acquire knowledge. And they come upon this small village. And the villagers are shutting their doors and their shutters and going, strangers, right? We better, hide. And so the three monks are thinking, how do we get the community members or the villagers to come out and share their knowledge? So they yell out, hey, everybody, we've got a huge pot here and 3 pieces of delicious stone that we're going to make stone soup. So they start boiling water in this pot. And the villagers are curious. They come out and they say, hey, if I give you some of this celery, can I have a bowl of that soup later on? Another one comes out and says, hey, if I give you some of this meat, can I have some of that soup? Another one comes out with some spices. And at the end of the day, the entire village is out enjoying a delicious bowl of stone soup. And this is what community is all about. Our online community is but a platform, an empty shell. And it's only with the contributions of individual members asking questions, writing blogs, blog posts, that we have this community that we have today. So for me personally and professionally, diversity is very important. And I am very privileged today to be able to share with you my own perspective around diversity and inclusion, and community. So a few important slides to share with you before I get to my own few slides. So we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion from a community perspective. Now, diversity and inclusion, just like sustainability, sustainability for the last couple of decades has been and still is an important topic, right? And diversity is as well. And you can see from all of the research and studies that are on the slide here how important it is. I've had people come up to me and question diversity, especially around community. They ask, isn't community a gathering of people with a common interest? And so don't you want people that are similar to you or to us? Well, that is what community means, and it's also not what community means, right? SAP as a community is only a label for this gathering, but the true essence of community is that sense of belonging, especially for folks who have always been felt and treated as outsiders. So that's the true meaning of community. And, community benefits from diversity in the same way that businesses benefit. We have greater innovation and creativity. We have greater engagement, and therefore a healthier, more loyal community. And of course, this profits the organization, right? Whether it's more ideas or reduced costs, right? Cost savings from people answering questions instead of SAP, right? So when you have diversity, you have a heartier, healthier, and a yummier soup that we can all enjoy at the end of the day. So that's why diversity matters. When you hear about diversity, you usually hear about inclusion as well. And I posted a blog and I asked, how are diversity and inclusion related? And then the million-dollar question, which is, which comes first, diversity or inclusion? And, I always ask, can you have diversity without inclusion? And you may have seen this some time ago in the workforce around, what do they call it? Affirmative action, equal employment, where organizations would set certain targets around diversity, and it's come with a negative connotation. Of course, it's also resulted in some negative consequences, right? where people who join the organization would start asking themselves, am I the best candidate for this job? Right? Do I belong? Or was I just the token minority that was hired? And this is never good. And I'm really proud that at SAP, we are focused on and so committed to inclusion. SAP's workforce right now has 5 different generations, 5. And I don't think it's because of poor retirement management. I think it's because we've got such an inclusive culture. And age is just one aspect of diversity. We have many more, we have much work ahead of us, right? That's going to keep us busy. But the bottom line here is that inclusion, rather than diversity, should be our goal. Okay. So what if you start with inclusion? Well, you start attracting qualified, passionate people who feel they belong, regardless of their age, their industry, their profession, and their seniority, and so on. And that's the really positive consequence that you want to have. Now, I'm not going to go so far to say that when you have an inclusion or a deliberate and dedicated inclusion program that you're going to be guaranteed diversity. But I think you get the point that when you have an inclusion culture or inclusive culture, that it makes it a lot easier to have diversity and to achieve your goal of diversity. And that's why for SAP community, our purpose here is to create an inclusive and receptive environment. How do you create that culture of inclusion? Well, with community, besides saying that that's what we intend to do, I use a simple model of value, belief, and behaviors. Now, our values may not need to change, and most of the time, we don't need to change that. But when we can change our beliefs, then it makes it a lot easier to change our behaviors. And here's an example from our community. We have this one member, maybe several members, who reads every one of our community managers' posts and announcements. And he would comment, and he would reply, and he would pick on every drop date or missed date or missed feature is really critical. Gives us a hard time, most of the time. So, this guy is obviously a troll, right? And the best way to handle a troll is to ignore them. Or is he? So if I use this model to kind of take a look from our own perspective of community managers creating an inclusive culture, what do we need to do? Well, let's decide whether this person is a troll or a valuable member, and look at value. We look at the role of community managers and keep in mind that we do want to include and create this inclusive environment. The first thing we need to do is to identify common goals, right? So what do community members value when they come to our community? Well, we've known that for many years now through our yearly surveys that people come to the community and they value getting their questions answered. They value being able to share their knowledge and build their reputation. Those are the same things that we want to encourage as community managers. Could it be then that this person, this member, that he also values being helpful? So the next thing is belief. We look at this member's belief, but before we look at this member's belief, we have to look at our own belief. And community managers, we believe we can make everybody happy, even though we know that it's not possible. And we believe that everybody has a natural disposition to be helpful if asked. So could it be that this member also believes that in order to be helpful, they need to let us know right away and to speak their mind? When we talk about beliefs as well, it's hard to avoid talking about biases. And there are unintentional and unconscious biases. And most people feel a little bit uncomfortable when they talk about biases because it's usually associated with discrimination. Now, there are good biases as well. For example, a parent telling their toddler to beware of a growling dog. That's a safety bias, right? Or there are biases that don't harm anybody. For example, my preference for aisle seats, right? But there are harmful biases, and it's the harmful biases that get in the way of creating a culture of inclusion. And that's what we have to be careful about. As community managers, we have a couple of biases as well. One is the bandwagon bias, or the, the groupthink bias, right? We know that people don't think and do things because it's right, but because everybody else around them is doing it, right? You might have seen this in elections, in stock markets, or maybe in team meetings, right? So this is what we have to be aware of as community managers, is to make sure that we allow everybody an opportunity to voice their opinions. Now, this doesn't mean that we allow them to go against the rules of engagement, things like civility, right? Let's make sure if you're posting something that you stay civil. But it does mean that we have to encourage and allow our members to speak up, and maybe even reduce and simplify our rules of engagement so that it's not as restrictive. The other bias that we have to contend with is the bias about the ostrich bias, where we're ignoring or avoiding things that may be negative, or members that may be negative, because all we want to hear is the positive things. And this is important because if we want to create a culture of inclusion, especially for the community, we have to acknowledge the concerns of our community members and make sure that they are included as well. Now, there are some of our community managers who might say, I don't have any biases. Well, there's a bias for that too. It's called the bias, or the blind spot bias, meaning we're biased against our own biases. But basically, what this is all about is that it is very, very important to allow our members the opportunity. Sorry about this. Let me make sure here I get everything. That we allow our community members to have an opportunity to voice their opinions and to speak out and to not ignore it. So, in this case, could it be that this member believes that they need to speak up, they need to voice their opinions, they need to share anything that, that may help us in order to be helpful? Behavior. So, what do community managers do to create an inclusive and a receptive environment? Now, it's just like at home and just like at work. You reward good behavior, right? In the community, we have likes, we have upvotes, we have different things like that, right? We might even make them members of the month. But it's about appropriate behavior or desired behaviors, right? And it's not just always about the positive behaviors, to say, yeah, I love what you guys are doing. It may be something such as what this person is doing, this member is doing, which is to point out to us that something is wrong. There's a bug, right? And we should allow this behavior. So when I look back at this member, it's like, could it be that this member is acting as a devil's advocate in order to help us? And that we should give them a chance to do this. I think that's all I have right now in terms of behavior. Now, there are certain things that I've learned from other societies that work with folks, for example, on the autism spectrum as well, that I have applied to community management. And that is that inclusion doesn't mean that in order to participate, you have to conform to the cultural or social norms of the majority, right? It means that diversity is so important to our community that we have to give every member an opportunity and give him or her a chance to learn, to have equal access to learning, to playing, to living, right? And I think this is such an important lesson for us. So as we're coming down to the end of this session, I would like you to walk away with a few things that I care about, and so that you can remember that good intentions alone does not create a culture of inclusion. We need to take some action. And the actions are C-A-R-E. C, meaning, we have to change our behaviors, right? We have to change our routines. We have to go and maybe meet up with somebody else different for lunch or talk to somebody different. A is to accept our biases. R, rely on our peers for support, for feedback, to keep us accountable. And E, examine our values, beliefs, and behaviors. And hopefully with that, we can all create a culture of inclusion. Thank you.